Okay, but there's not even a single map in this entire book. Hey, it's Em, and I've got my own little orga on my lap right now, which is to say Crowley is here and may very well cause chaos at some point in this video. Be forewarned. Today we're going to talk about Emily Wild's Map of the Otherlands, which is the sequel to Emily Wild's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which I will link my review to that somewhere if you haven't seen it, but most people, most subscribers I think have, and a lot of people who aren't subscribed I think have. It's my second most popular video at the time of this filming. I wasn't a big fan of that book. This book I liked more, so that is perhaps a very low bar. We will talk about it. This takes place in 1910. I think it starts in September and goes into October. So a few months after the previous book. Emily Wild is a dryadologist at Cambridge University in England. Wendell Bamblebee is her peer cohort, also love interest, and just happens to be actually the heir to a fairy throne from a fairy kingdom in Ireland, but he has been exiled. Well, he was chased out because his stepmother assassinated his family and he got away. He is the rightful heir to the throne, but she has taken over. The whole point is for him to find a doorway back to his kingdom, I guess, and retake it. I don't even really remember, and the motivations in both these books are very murky. The plots are kind of all over the place, and the leaps in logic that are made by Emily and associates are often just like, what? Like the assumptions and things are sometimes just like, what is going on here? That being said, I enjoyed this book more, and I will say, there's a bias, right? Well, it's all relative, and there is something called proximity bias, which means that when you've read a lot of good books and then you read another book that is probably good, or, even just average, it will, by comparison, not seem as good because you've read a lot of really great books before it. As you may have seen in my videos this year, I'm struggling to find good books to read. So this one, relatively, via proximity bias, maybe seems better than it is. I noticed in a lot of reviews, people who liked the first book hated this book. So maybe I'm just the opposite of that, where like, I really didn't like the first book. This book I liked a bit more. I gave it 3.5 stars, which I rounded up to 4 on Goodreads because I was at least more entertained, which again isn't saying a whole lot, but we'll talk about it. There may be spoilers ahead as I get into some plot points that I'm just like, what? But, or some things that irritated me. So if you don't want spoilers, read the book and come back. You've been warned. So yeah, so this starts in September of 1910. Emily and Wendell are at Cambridge for the fall session, semester, or whatever they have. They have quarters, I think. But in any case, they're there. It's just been Wendell's birthday. I know I'm probably supposed to know these characters' ages. Emily is late 20s, early 30s, I think. Wendell doesn't matter because he's actually a fairy king, so they age differently, slowly. I don't know. In any case, they're not technically immortal because they can be killed, so, but they live a long time. It turns out that at his birthday party, Wendell was poisoned, potentially by assassins sent by his stepmother. you know, Emily's like, why now, after all these years, would she would she want to kill you? Like, what, you know, what difference does it make now? And Wendell's like, well, actually, it's because she's realized that I have asked you to marry me. And Wendell says it's because his stepmother believes that if she kills Wendell, Emily will come after her, like, vengeance wise, which I'm like, okay, so that's a reason not to kill Wendell? Like, again, the logic, and a lot of things in these books are hand waved by, oh, fairies, you know, they just don't make sense, they just do weird shit, like we don't know why they do what they do, they're unknowable, which is, I feel like, a cop-out for a lack of consistency and good planning and plotting. But okay, they're still looking for this door, and they think they have a map by the dryadologist who disappeared like 50 years ago or something, like is it Danielle de Grey? She disappeared in the Alps, and another dryadologist, Eichhorn, had also gone after her and disappeared, and Emily has started seeing his ghost or some apparition of Eichhorn. And I'm like, you know, you have to just kind of suspend a lot of care about the details and the intricacies, because you will make yourself crazy trying to find consistency or any kind of actual logic in any of this. And again, a lot of it is just like, oh, well, you know, this is just how it is. This is how it is when you're studying fairies or whatever. But yeah, and then Emily now has an assistant. It's actually her 19-year-old niece, Ariadne, who has come to study dryadology as well, despite Emily's brother always kind of looking down on Emily for that. Ariadne had been apprenticed to a dressmaker, I guess, but eventually came to Cambridge, and that's all we know. Like, we don't have any history of how she made that jump, or, you know, what caused it. Like, I don't know. Probably doesn't matter. Ariadne's supposed to be this brilliant pupil, but is honestly just kind of useless in a lot of ways. And it's like, why is she even there? Wendell gives her a scarf to keep her safe, in the same way Emily's cloak that he kind of tailored for her. It was her cloak, but he tidied it up. Does Emily, and the cloak and the scarf are a big deal throughout the book in helping Emily and Ariadne stay safe, I guess. Meanwhile, Wendell's kind of sidelined a lot because of this poisoning, where he can still use his magic, but not as effectively. It kind of goes wrong a lot. He tires out quickly. He passes out a lot. Emily does a lot of just lying there staring at him, but then also at one point in the book is like, well, you know, I'm not the romantic type, so I wasn't just gonna, you know, lay there and look at him while he slept. And I'm like, bitch, you just did that 2 chapters ago. Again, consistency, not there, not in this book. And I realize I am, like, digging my claws in and then saying I liked it. But again, I liked it relative to the first book, because they go to the Alps. It's Emily, Wendell, Ariadne, and their boss, the department head, whose name is Ferris Rose. He comes along too, because he wants to help find this nexus, which is a door. I mean, you know, it's a nexus. It's basically a door into multiple fairy worlds, I guess, you know. And they think it exists where de Grey and Eichhorn disappeared. So they're going out to find it, and possibly find de Grey and Eichhorn, which they do in the most anticlimactic of ways. Wendell just literally is able to find them and pop them out of the kind of fairy borderlands they've been stuck in for decades. Hey. And then de Grey and Eichhorn aren't really grateful and don't really help them do anything. So it's like, again, why even have this as a plot? Why is this a thing? In the meantime, they do in fact find the Nexus, and Emily goes into Wendell's kingdom without him because he has been sidelined by this poison and he is dying, maybe, potentially. He's got these black birds under his, that kind of you can see under his skin sometimes and even in his eyes, and that's a bad omen. There are like stories that of course are in the footnotes about what these blackbirds mean and the stories about them. And Emily needs to go get Wendell's pet cat, Orga. Black cat, like my cats. I'm like, yay. And this is probably why I like Wendell more than Emily. He's a cat person. And I don't mind dogs. You know, Emily and Shadow, fine, whatever. But I am a cat person, so that's just, you know. And, yeah. She goes and gets the cat, and they save Wendell with the cat. Honestly, the whole thing feels like fan fiction. You know, somebody who writes fan fiction in installments, and like there are like episodes, but they don't ever really resolve or go anywhere because the idea is to keep the story going. That's what these books feel like to me. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I like fan fiction. I just want more from from my published, you know. Yeah, I mean, my standards are higher for that. That being said, again, I gave it 3.5 stars. It's, there's a lot of Emily wandering around and Wendell saving her, and there are some, you know, more different types of fairies we run into. This little fox-like one, and they're all they all have more or less, aside from the way they're described, they all have more or less the same attitudes, which makes them not terribly interesting as individual. Like, I'm like, why would you even want to study these? They all kind of act and behave the same, aside from, you know, I don't know, eating habits maybe. They all just kind of look down on the human world, and okay, you know, I don't know. And then when Emily's in the fairy realm, Wendell's kingdom, again, very conveniently, she's like, oh, but it messes with your memory, and so I'm not really sure what happened here. It's foggy, but then the next thing I knew, I was here, and, you know, or whatever. And I'm like, again, just feels like a lot of hand waving. It feels like a cop out. It was like the author didn't know how to get the character from here to here in an interesting way, and was just like, I just want to teleport them, so I'll just make them forget how they got there, or, you know, what happened in these like interactions or whatever. Yeah, there's going to be a third book, and I don't, do I read it? Don't I read it? This book ends with it. Wendell is better. It ends in December of 2010 with them going back into Wendell's kingdom. They've kind of marshaled a hodgepodge army of like some trolls and some fawns. These fawns are kind of like nasty beasties, but somehow, and then the guardians from Wendell's kingdom, which are these owl-like creatures, have decided to be loyal to him as the rightful king, and they're gonna back him up, and they've got the little fox-like, yeah, I don't know. This book also has Poe from the first book, which is, he's a very sweet little fairy, that I honestly, of all the fairies, he's the one that actually does seem to have a personality trait, but it might just be that he's the only one like him, and if there were a bunch of them and they were all that way, I'd just be like, oh, you know, one of a dozen. But because he's kind of an individualized character, he has more personality, and yeah, I really like him. We're back in another little village, same as the first book. This book hits a lot of the same beats as the first book. Back in a little village, making friends with these villagers. They accidentally upset some villagers because things go wrong and they screw stuff up, and then they're almost ejected from the village. Like, you know. So in some ways it's like reading this book is just reading another version of the first book. It's just that, again, for me, the story was slightly more interesting because, you know, I was like, okay, they're gonna go look for these missing dryadologists. They're gonna look for this door. Like, it felt, at least in that way, less amorphous than the first book did. Again, this is all Emily's journal, except for one chapter in which Wendell decides he's gonna add his 2 cents while Emily is sleeping. Okay. I still don't see the chemistry between Wendell and Emily. I don't understand that at all. Like, I feel like there's this couple, as a couple, they just don't, there's nothing. There's some closed door hanky-panky in this book, but it's like they don't even remark on it. Emily doesn't think about it, write about it, which seems weird. I mean, I get it. It's a journal that I guess she expects other people to read as opposed to a personal private diary. I don't know. Yeah, I felt like Ariadne was kind of a useless character. Rose was actually interesting in the conversations he had with Emily. I think he, as the department head, was probably the most interesting character, and I'm bummed that Wendell just didn't get more page time because he was either pulling people out of ferry or fainting. Like, you know, that was kind of his whole and only job this entire book, and that's not super exciting, you know, and it just didn't really give him a chance. And I mean, a lot of it is just him being kind of complainy in his way, and it gets tiresome. I want to see more of his personality. I want to see, you know, he has moments where he's fighting the assassins, and, you know, Emily just kind of writes it off as, oh, he's in a murderous mood or what. I'm like, really? I mean, Emily has so little emotion, like, in her writing, that she kind of makes things that would be exciting or interesting less so. Like, she is not the POV character we need for any of this. I want to hear from some other people. But, yeah. And again, as somebody who is autistic, and people go, oh, well, she's autistic. I'm like, you know what? I can tell a good story. I do have emotions, and I know how to use them and inflect and things like that. You know, that is not an excuse for her being this bland. And, like, for somebody who's supposedly all in and so invested, she sounds really just passive, impassive. I don't know. In any case, okay, so, yeah, but better than the first book for me. I mean, I thought. And, yeah, and I guess just based on other things I've read this year, this was at least more entertaining than some of these other books I've read. So it ended up with a 3.5. Maybe I should have just left it at a 3, I don't know. But, you know, over time I may revise it, but it was fine. And I don't know if I'm curious to see what it's like once they're in Wendell's realm and maybe he's king again. Will that change the dynamic? Will it make it more interesting? I don't know. I guess we can see. But until next time, the cat wants out. So that is my cue to be done. And until next time, if you've read it, let me know your thoughts. Should I read the third one? I don't even know. It probably won't be out until next year or something. But all that being said, take care.